I'm here just to quickly introduce this very important launch of the Center for Global Energy Policy. The center has been in operation for some time, so this is not, in fact, the actual beginning of the work, but it is a very important moment for us to celebrate this launch, or this center, and to use it as the occasion to begin to think broadly about questions of energy policy. Let me just begin by, I'll turn this over to Rob Lieberman in just a second, but I want to thank a few people for being here, in particular Mayor Bloomberg. The mayor has done many things with and especially for Columbia, and we're always grateful for his presence here. And he has done an enormous amount, of course, for the city, not least of which is to focus on climate change and to create a sustainability initiative. This was done in 2007. We at Columbia are part of this, and I'm happy to say that we are now halfway toward our goal of achieving a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions on this campus. So we're very, very pleased and proud to have the mayor here this morning. I also want to thank and welcome Tom Donilon, President Obama's National Security Advisor, Daniel Poneman, who until yesterday had been serving as Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Energy and has now been named Acting Secretary, and Carlos Pascual, the Obama Administration's Special Envoy for International Energy Affairs. There's nothing more important to the world than energy and therefore energy policy. I mean, it's just absolutely vital to modern life. We sort of all know that, and yet we don't know a lot about it. And we're really too ignorant, in my view, about all the array of issues connected with energy, even the basic facts of kinds of energy, where energy comes from, and what it means. And that lack of knowledge really extends, in my view, to the academic world as well. When I began teaching as a young law professor in the 1970s, constitutional law, U.S. constitutional law, had already become center stage in the intellectual life of law schools across the United States, and it remains more or less there today. But before that, up until about 1960, 1965, every law school would have an expert on oil and gas, as it was called, and there would be a course on oil and gas law. Energy, as it even became more important, was crowded towards the periphery, and in many law schools across the country today, my bet is, although I haven't done the research to confirm this, is that we do not have regular courses on energy law. I'm not just picking on law schools. I just do that because I happen to know about law schools. I think, broadly speaking, across the university academic disciplines, we are devoting, in a way, too few intellectual resources, or energy, as it were, to these very important questions. And so I welcome this center deeply, not just for the importance of the subject and for the importance of Columbia's involvement in this, but I welcome it really as, I think, a wedge into bringing intellectual resources along into this large subject. So my view, again, is every educated person ought to come out of a university, especially one like this, with a fairly extensive knowledge of this subject. And my hope is that it will do that, among other things. So we're very happy to have somebody as sophisticated, as dedicated, as knowledgeable about this as Jason Bordoff to lead this very important center. So let me turn this over now to Rob Lieberman, who's been helpful and responsible for setting this up, the Interim Dean of School of International Public Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, for joining us and for helping to inaugurate the Center on Global Energy Policy. On behalf of the School of International and Public Affairs, I'm delighted to be here to celebrate the beginning of this new venture. We're especially proud to be launching the Center on Global Energy Policy today, which, as Lee said, is an enormously important venture for the school and for the university, and we think for the country and for the world, because the topic and the focus of this center is so important and is so crucial to so many of the core global public policy issues that face the world today. We like to think humbly that there's no better place to undertake this kind of work than at SIPA, which is the world's most global public policy school. We're dedicated to thinking and teaching and learning about public policy issues that are by their very nature transnational, that cross boundaries, that are global, that engage different parts of the world, different disciplines, different kinds of enterprises. And energy policy are increasingly at the center of that nexus of things that SIPA and the global public policy community care about. Energy policy is important critically for issues like economic and political development, international security, sustainability, urbanism and the need to create livable cities around the world in an era in which more than 50% of the world's population now lives in cities. And the capacity to really understand and make progress on key issues of energy security, of energy supply, and energy demand will be critical to helping our students, our faculty, and our colleagues think carefully about these issues and help to address some of the world's most knotty and pressing and deep policy problems. So we're very, very excited to be launching the center. The center has really, as Lee said, the center has been in operation for a few months now and has really gotten off to a fantastic start. We've hosted several very important events already this semester. The Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas for India discussed energy security in the Asia region. The Assistant Secretary of Defense and a SIPA alum, I should add, Sharon Burke, came to discuss the Defense Department's view of critical energy activities and their connection with national security. The center has recently announced its first fellow, David Sandilow, former acting Undersecretary of Energy and U.S. Assistant Secretary for Policy and International Affairs. David will be joining the school next year and will spend the year as the inaugural fellow of the center. We're very excited to have him as a member of the Columbia community and the SIPA community for next year. So I think you'll agree, and I think after today you'll see why we expect the center to really bring into very sharp focus these key issues relating to energy and its connection to all of the other global public policy challenges that the world faces, to do it in a way that adheres to the highest academic standards in research, to bring together key players from academia and the policy world and the business world in a productive way, in a constructive way that brings insights from all of these sectors and all of these worlds together so that we can make progress on these important issues. To accomplish all this, we had to find someone to make this all happen. This was a vision that has been brewing at Columbia and at SIPA for a long time. I should say that this is not really the initiation of energy studies at SIPA, but the continuation and building on a platform that's been in existence at the school for more than 10 years. So we are really, in a sense, not launching, but relaunching the study of energy and energy policy at SIPA. But to accomplish that relaunch, we had to find someone who could bring to Columbia all of these virtues, a deep knowledge of the field, a deep appreciation and capacity to bring the highest standards of research and academic quality to the things that the center accomplishes, and incredible connections in the energy world. And we found that person in Jason Bordoff. Jason has arrived at Columbia this past winter as a professor of professional practice in international public affairs. He came to Columbia from the White House, where it seems that he held just about every job available, working at various times for the National Economic Council, the White House Council on Economic Quality, Environmental Quality, and the National Security Council, as really in a senior leadership position at precisely the nexus of energy policy and economic policy, international trade, security policy, and all of the things that then energy touches for the president. We're delighted that he's brought his expertise and his knowledge and his network to Columbia. And I'm very delighted and pleased to introduce to you Jason Bordoff, the director of the Center on Global Economic Policy.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate everyone being here today and for our extraordinarily distinguished lineup of speakers for taking time out of their schedule to be here today to help us celebrate the launch of this new energy center. I'm going to be very brief because you came here to hear them, not to hear me. Just a couple of words about the center and what we're going to endeavor to do. You're going to hear from Dan Yergin in a minute, but I think when the next Dan Yergin writes the next book on the history of energy, maybe decades from now, they're going to look back at this moment in time that we're in right now as a really transformational moment in our energy history. Vast new technologies are unlocking vast new hydrocarbon resources across North America and most likely soon elsewhere around the world. Clean energy technologies are making rapid advancements and costs are coming down. Climate change impacts are being felt with more frequency and severity. And Hurricane Sandy here in New York was a painful reminder of that for people who live here. All these changes are having profound economic, geopolitical, national security, and environmental impacts. And we're going to hear today from, as I said, a truly distinguished group of speakers about exactly what those impacts are. And it's really, energy policy needs to keep pace with how quickly the energy world is changing. It's really extraordinary to think about the kinds of energy policy choices that people have to think about today that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. Should the United States export energy? Not just natural gas, but crude oil too. How do we address the fact that infrastructure constraints are leading to huge price disconnects as a result of the need to change how we move energy around this country? How do we address the fact that massive amounts of oil are being moved by train in this country? The greatest innovation of the early 19th century is now how we're moving energy. How do we address the fact that North Dakota lights up at night as brightly as Chicago because all the natural gas that's coming to the surface with the liquids can't find a way to market because of infrastructure constraints? How should our posture toward the Middle East change if we import very little oil from the Middle East? How do we increase the resilience of our fuel system to deal with things like Hurricane Sandy so we don't go through that again? Again, the energy policy choices that we face in the coming years are going to be critical for determining whether we can realize the opportunities and address the challenges that are associated with how rapidly the energy landscape is changing. And ultimately, whether we can meet the defining challenge for the next generation, which is how to provide billions more people with affordable, reliable, secure sources of energy in a sustainable manner. And from my experience working in the White House for 4 years, I remember policy issues suddenly hit your desk and you're in the middle of a crisis or a chaos and you have far too little time, not as much as you'd like, to really understand them and to really do thoughtful, deep analysis to get on top of them. And so what would be really helpful would be able to look outside, elsewhere in the world, and say, who has already looked at this? Who's answered this question? Who's done really good analysis that I can trust, that helps me understand what's happening in the energy world? And too often there'll be an economic study funded by one industry association and another study funded by another that says precisely the opposite. And you're trying to figure out which one is better done and which one to believe. What we need more of is trusted, objective sources of analysis that can help policymakers understand how the energy world is changing, explain what it means, and explain what they should do about it and what specific policy recommendations and changes they need to make. And that's the mission for the Center on Global Energy Policy here at Columbia, to provide cutting-edge research based on real-world experience and market insights that will help policymakers navigate the increasingly complex world of energy. And to do that, we're going to draw on the unique and extraordinary resources we have being here in New York City, the World Center for Energy Finance and Energy Markets and much of the energy industry. We're going to draw on Columbia's world-class faculty, Columbia's global energy centers in key energy countries like Brazil and China and the Middle East. I couldn't be more excited about this center's potential. I couldn't be more honored to be part of this extraordinary faculty at Columbia, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be back in my hometown of New York. We're already off to a great start, as you heard, with a fantastic lineup of speakers and events that we've had. We, as you heard, have already brought in our inaugural fellow, David Sandalo, who held one of the most senior positions at the Department of Energy and will for another week or two. Earlier this week, we announced that Nobuo Tanaka, the former head of the International Energy Agency, will also be a non-resident fellow at the center and will be traveling here several times a year to do research and engage with students in the Columbia community. So we're off and running. We have an exciting lineup of future events that you'll hear about, including the next one, I think, in mid-May with a Korean partner and lots of people coming from that region to talk about the Pacific Rim impacts of the North American shale revolution. So I'm really excited. I want to turn things over now, but just thank a few people before I do that. First, I want to thank Lee Bollinger, John Coatsworth, the provost, Dean Lieberman, for providing me with this extraordinary opportunity and by honoring me, by letting me be part of the Columbia community. There are too many people to thank for making today possible, but let me just mention a couple. Jesse Gale, Joanne Crawford, Eileen Marque, John Marolo, Madeline Storms, Katie Cashin, Stephanie Mueller, Leslie Patterson, everyone who arrived early and is going to stay late to help put this all together. And then especially Jesse McCormick, who worked for me in the White House and was excited enough about this center's potential that he gave up his job at the White House to move here to New York to help start this center and for his tireless efforts to help realize the vision that we have for it. A few quick procedural announcements. There will be, during all the Q&A that people have up on stage, there'll be an opportunity for questions from the audience as well. If you'd like to submit a question, there are index cards in the programs that were on your seat. Please write your name as clearly as possible on the note card, along with your question and to whom the question is addressed, and then pass it to the people collecting them, and we'll give those to the moderator up here on stage. For those of you watching via live stream, we haven't forgotten you. You can also submit your questions to our Twitter account at Columbia U Energy. Please silence your cell phones to be courteous to those around you as well as to our speakers. So thank you again for coming. To set the stage for the conference, you really could not ask for a better leadoff speaker than Daniel Yergin. Daniel is widely recognized as the world's leading energy expert. More than once at the White House when we were dealing with a difficult or thorny energy issue, at some point someone would say, "What does Yergin think?" And wherever he was in the world, he would generously get on the phone and help make us a little bit smarter. He quite literally wrote the book on oil, winning the Pulitzer Prize for the book The Prize, which I just learned this morning. He received the Pulitzer Prize in this room in Low Library years ago. It's a book every student of energy has to read. Everyone in this room should read, not just for its insightful historical analysis, but for its extraordinary, outrageous, colorful cast of characters who make up the history of oil. And then recently he did it again with The Quest, telling the most coherent, compelling, insightful story about where we are and where we're going in our energy future. On a personal note, I've been extraordinarily lucky as someone trying to make my career in the energy space to have Dan as a mentor for many years. He's been endlessly generous with his very limited time. And I am very grateful for his friendship, for his advice, for his wisdom. I can't express enough how much I've benefited from it. Please join me in welcoming Dan Yergin.